Welcome to the Hindu Daily.
Thank you so much for tuning in.
So imagine you're sitting at a restaurant, right? And at the table next to you, there are these two highly advanced, multi-million-dollar AI robots.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
And they are just ruthlessly fighting over who gets to pay the bill. But while they're fighting, they are literally inflating the prices on the menu.
That sounds like a complete nightmare.
It really is. And later in today's deep dive, we'll explain why that exact scenario is currently costing the U.S. healthcare system literally billions of dollars.
Yeah, that's a wild story we'll get into.
But first, we are diving into 9 major pieces across today's newspaper. We're looking at the editorial, opinion, science, text and context, and business sections. Our goal here is to really extract the mechanics behind the headlines for you.
Right, unpacking the why. Because it's not just about what happened, it's about how these policies, technologies, and, geopolitical shifts actually work, and ultimately what they mean for you.
Exactly. And looking through this incredibly dense stack of reporting today, there's a really clear theme that jumps out.
There really is. When you look closely, you start to see this fascinating through line connecting all of them. It's basically this recurring friction between what a system intends to do and how human behavior actually executes it on the ground.
Yes, the intention versus execution gap. And we see that friction immediately in today's editorial section. They take a really hard look at India's innovation gap.
Right, the paradox of progress.
Yeah, because the government is currently throwing just massive intent at the wall. I mean, we have a new 1 lakh crore rupee research development and innovation fund.
Which is a huge number.
Huge.
Yeah.
Plus another 20,000 crore allocated specifically for deep tech startups. They even passed the Shanti Act, which lifts this long-standing blanket ban on patenting atomic energy inventions.
Yeah, so on paper, it really looks like an absolute boom. And we have actually climbed to 38th in the Global Innovation Index.
But then you look at the data and it reveals this glaring paradox, right? The private sector is just completely failing to execute on this momentum.
The disparity between state policy and private investment is honestly staggering. Right now, India's overall R&D spend is hovering at just 0.65% of GDP.
Wow. Less than 1%.
Less than 1%. That is the lowest among BRICS nations if you exclude South Africa. And it's miles behind peers like South Korea or Japan.
So the state is basically carrying the whole load.
Exactly. The state is essentially carrying the entire weight of early-stage innovation funding.
It feels like the government just built this massive, multi-lane German Autobahn specifically designed for high-speed innovation, and they even paid all the tolls for it.
Right.
But the private sector insists on driving a bullet cart on it because they just don't want to pay for the high-octane fuel.
Yeah.
It's like buying a state-of-the-art gym membership for yourself, but then absolutely refusing to lift the heavy weights required to actually build muscle.
That's a great analogy, because the heavy lifting in this context requires patient capital. Long gestation, high-risk research.
Which they aren't doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Historically, Indian industry just hasn't relied on proprietary technology to grow. It has relied on labor-intensive scaling.
Even for the new tech companies.
Oh, especially them. When you look at many of India's new-age tech unicorns, like the instant grocery delivery platforms, their core business models aren't actually built on defensible, deep-tech scientific breakthroughs.
Right. They're not inventing new microchips.
Exactly. They're built on an abundance of cheap, flexible labor.
And you can see the direct result of that in the international patent numbers.
Oh, the patent numbers are telling.
Yeah, I mean, domestic patent filings have doubled, sure. But when you look at the international ones, the Patent Cooperation Treaty, or PCT applications, India filed roughly 4,547 last year.
And compare that to China.
Right. China filed over 70,000. Even Switzerland filed more than we did.
Because inventors only spend the money to seek international patents for genuinely commercially viable, globally competitive ideas.
Which means we just aren't producing them at scale.
Right. And this gap highlights how technology transfer fundamentally fails in India. A breakthrough happens in a university laboratory, a paper gets published, and then the idea just kind of dies.
There's no bridge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There is no reliable bridge of venture capital willing to fund the 10-year high-risk gap between an academic paper and a commercial prototype.
So they just play it safe.
Yeah. High-tech entrepreneurship requires an ecosystem that actively tolerates failure. And until the private sector is willing to lose money on risky science, a 1 lakh crore government fund won't magically translate into globally dominant technologies.
Man, Well, that deep-seated reliance on cheap, flexible labor actually leads us perfectly into the second piece in the editorial section. It examines India's new labor codes.
This is a really critical issue,
Yeah, because the economic survey recently predicted that these new codes would boost formalization in the workforce from 60.4% up to 75.5%.
which sounds fantastic.
It sounds great, but the ground reality is that over 80% of India's workers are currently informal. And the analysis we're looking at suggests these new codes might actually drive that informality even higher.
Yeah, to understand why that is, you'd have to look at how the rules of the game are changing for corporations.
Okay, break that down for us.
So the new Occupational Safety, Health, and Working Conditions Code changes the very definition of a factory. It raises the threshold from 10 workers to 20 workers with power.
Meaning smaller places don't have to comply with factory rules.
Exactly. It also raises the threshold for needing government approval for layoffs. It used to be 100 workers, now it's 300 workers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And predictably, direct factory employment has already plummeted. It went from 61% in 2011 down to 47% in 2023. Meanwhile, the use of contract labor has just surged.
Okay, but if we are defining a formal job by making it incredibly easy for companies to hire people on short-term, fixed-term contracts without any long-term security or benefits, I mean, isn't that just a rebranding exercise?
It absolutely is.
That's not formalization. That's just taking precarious, informal work, slapping a new legal label on it, and calling it a massive success. Like, if you're listening to this and you order dinner tonight through a delivery app, you are interacting directly with this exact model.
Highly vulnerable labor branded as modern flexibility.
Exactly.
And researchers actually have a name for this. They call it the formalization illusion.
The formalization illusion.
Yeah. Lowering compliance costs for corporations does not magically generate high-quality, secure jobs if companies simply use those relaxed rules to replace permanent employees with disposable contract workers.
Right.
And then you have to add in the rebranding of labor inspectors.
Right.
They're now called inspector-cum-facilitators.
Right, which sounds incredibly helpful until you realize what it actually does in practice.
Yeah, it allows employers to bypass serious violations like chronic wage theft or severe safety failures by simply paying a prescribed fine.
Which is just a slap on the wrist.
Worse than that, if the fine is mathematically cheaper than the cost of actually complying with the law, breaking the law just becomes a standard budgeted business expense.
So they just pay the fine and keep exploiting the workers.
Exactly. The workers' lived reality remains completely informal and unprotected.
Wow. So while domestic policies are attempting to manage these internal labor markets, India is simultaneously navigating some intense external pressures.
Very intense.
Moving over to today's opinion section, there's a fascinating look at the shifting, volatile sands of India's West Asia policy. Specifically, our diplomatic tightrope amid the ongoing conflict involving Israel, the U.S., and Iran.
And obviously, we're just looking at the strategic mechanics here impartially, as laid out in the analysis by Thomas Ahmad and Kabir Taneja.
Right, no picking sides, just analyzing the geopolitics.
Exactly. And it offers a very pragmatic look at what's at play. Prime Minister Modi visited Israel shortly before the joint Israeli-U.S. strikes on Iran, and India has conspicuously abstained from condemning the killing of Ayatollah Khamenei.
And the stakes here for India are just unimaginably high. I mean, on one side, we rely deeply on Israel for advanced defense technology.
Yes, we do.
But on the other side, we have 10 million Indian citizens living and working in the Gulf. And we depend heavily on that broader region to keep our lights on and our cars running with energy imports.
It's a massive balancing act.
It is. I look at this and wonder, is the strategy of maintaining this strategic ambiguity actually a diplomatic masterclass? Or are we just burying our heads in the sand and hoping the whole region doesn't explode?
Well, Ahmad's perspective is that in moments of extreme strategic churn, showing emotional bonding or taking firm sides actually severely limits your future options.
Okay, so stay detached.
Right. Maintaining a detached, ambiguous stance keeps all your channels open. And Taneja points out that the Gulf countries themselves are performing an identical tightrope walk.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're taking a purely defensive posture. They are intercepting projectiles in their airspace, sure, but they are explicitly avoiding using the word war.
Because it would wreck their economies.
Joining any offensive against Iran would be politically and economically disastrous for them domestically.
And the economic fallout is already hitting major infrastructure projects, isn't it? Like the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, the IMSE, is completely stalled out.
Completely stalled.
Mm.
Because capital is cowardly.
Capital is cowardly. I like that.
It's true. You can draw all the ambitious trade routes you want on a map, but if investors at shipping companies are frightened by regional instability, the corridor simply won't be built.
Right.
And compounding all of this is the unpredictable variable of the United States.
Mhm.
Ahmad highlights former President Trump's previous imposition of tariffs on India and his highly personalized foreign policy.
Like his grievances.
Yes, including his stated grievance that he was denied a Nobel Prize because India didn't give him enough credit for brokering a ceasefire with Pakistan.
Wow.
When personal grievances dictate tariffs, it adds a really erratic layer to an already volatile regional puzzle.
It really does. Well, shifting gears entirely now into today's science section. Let's zoom in from the macro-level unpredictability of global war to a deeply personal, microscopic level of anxiety.
We're talking about the fear parents face during a prenatal ultrasound.
Yes, we are looking at this quiet revolution happening in pediatric urology.
It's honestly a profound shift in medical philosophy.
Mm.
Decades ago, if a child had a severe kidney or urinary anomaly, it was usually only discovered when the child became acutely ill.
Which is terrifying.
And it almost always resulted in massive traumatic open surgeries. But today, high-resolution maternal ultrasounds catch these anomalies months before the baby's even born.
I can only imagine sitting in that dark ultrasound room and hearing a doctor say your unborn baby has dilated kidneys. I mean, the immediate instinct would be to panic and demand they fix it right away.
Absolutely.
It's like noticing a tiny superficial scratch on your car and deciding to rip out the entire engine block just to be safe, rather than waiting to see if it even rusts.
That panic is totally natural. But pediatricians will tell you this early knowledge is actually a gift because it allows for what they call watchful waiting.
Watchful waiting.
Yes. Often, what the ultrasound reveals is hydronephrosis, which is a stretching of the kidney where urine collects.
Huh.
Because we know about it early, doctors can monitor it. And in the vast majority of cases, it resolves completely on its own as the child grows.
So no scalpel required at all.
No scalpel required.
But when intervention is needed, the mechanics of how they do it now are just mind-blowing to me.
The technology is incredible.
Like take posterior urethral valves, or PUV. That's where a tiny fold of tissue blocks urine from exiting the bladder in newborn boys. Instead of cutting open a fragile infant, doctors use a cystoscope, basically a microscopic camera, to enter the urethra and clear the blockage from the inside with zero external cuts.
Incredible, right?
It is. Or this condition called VUR, where urine washes backward into the kidneys. They treat it with an endoscopic gel injection. It is literally like a plumber fixing a leaky one-way valve from the inside of the pipe using a microscopic camera, rather than tearing down the entire bathroom wall.
That's spot on. The gel injection literally creates a small, flexible cushion that acts as a one-way gate, stopping the backflow.
Wow.
And for older children dealing with complex blockages, surgeons are now utilizing 3D robotic-assisted surgery.
Like a robot does the surgery.
The surgeon sits at a console with a 10 times magnified 3D view. They use robotic wrists that physically filter out normal human hand tremors to perform microscopic suturing inside the child.
That is just sci-fi level stuff.
It is. The takeaway here is that early detection no longer equals immediate aggressive trauma. It allows for highly precise, gentle care.
Staying in the science section, that theme of hyper-targeted, minimally invasive intervention brings us to the rise of peptide therapeutics. We are fundamentally changing how we treat diseases at the molecular level.
We really are. And to understand why this is such a breakthrough, you have to know what a peptide actually is.
Okay, what is it?
They're essentially very short chains of amino acids, the exact same building blocks that make up proteins in your body.
Okay.
Because naturally occurring peptides act as chemical messengers, regulating your hormones, your metabolism. Your immune response scientist can now design synthetic peptides to target highly specific biological pathways.
So they act like biological postmen.
Yes, exactly.
They take a highly specific chemical message and deliver it only to the exact cells that need to read it, and they just completely ignore the rest of the bottle.
Which reduces side effects dramatically.
And the data here is wild. There are over 80 approved peptide drugs on the market, making up almost 9% of recent FDA approvals. The most famous right now are the GLP-1 drugs for diabetes and obesity.
Exactly. GLP-1 is a peptide hormone. When scientists synthesize it, it essentially mimics the natural hormone that tells your pancreas to release insulin and tells your brain, I am full, stop eating. It is an incredibly precise mechanism.
And this is a massive, but if you spend any time on social media, you have likely seen fitness influencers heavily promoting peptides for like anti-aging, extreme fat loss, and muscle growth.
Yes, the biohacking trend.
Right. If these are highly specific hormonal messengers, isn't there a severe danger in people just buying unproven chemical chains online and injecting them into their stomachs?
Oh, there's a massive danger. The experts draw a very stark, very frightening line between clinical medicine and unregulated biohacking.
How so?
Well, FDA-approved peptides undergo rigorous clinical trials to ensure they hit the correct cellular targets.
Yeah.
The online biohacking market, however, is selling compounds labeled strictly as research chemicals.
Meaning they aren't for humans.
They have zero human clinical trials because peptides directly hijack your hormonal pathways. Injecting unapproved, impure compounds can trigger severe endocrine imbalances and serious cardiovascular events.
That's terrifying.
It is. Precision medicine is incredibly dangerous when it lacks precision regulation.
Wow. Well, that human tendency to bypass the rules for a quick fix isn't just happening in unregulated medicine. Jumping over to the text and context section, we are seeing a massive structural bypass happening right now in Indian electoral politics.
This is a fascinating data dive.
It is. There is a staggering gap between women's voter participation and their actual representation in power. Again, we're just looking at the impartial data here.
Right, and the historical context here is critical. Back in the 1967 Lok Sabha election, there was an 11.2 percentage point gap between male and female voter turnout.
So men voted, women largely stayed home.
Exactly. But fast forward to the 2024 elections, and that gap has completely vanished. Women are voting at absolute parity with men.
Which is a huge democratic achievement.
It is. Yet, despite making up half the voting base, women constitute only about 14% of the Lok Sabha.
See, I always hear political parties use the exact same excuse for this. They claim women are simply less electable.
Right, that's the standard line.
But the data completely destroys that myth. In the 2024 elections, women had a 9% success rate compared to men's 6%. In 2019, it was 11% for women and 6% for men.
The numbers don't lie.
If women are consistently winning at higher rates when they actually run, the problem isn't the voters. The problem is the parties flat out refusing to give women tickets. I mean, out of thousands of male candidates in 2024, there were only 800 women on the ballot.
Yeah, the bottleneck is absolutely at the nomination level, and it's driven by deeply entrenched patriarchal structures.
How does that play out on the ground?
Well, the Lockneedy CSDS survey sheds a lot of light on the invisible barriers preventing women from even seeking those nominations. For instance, 50% of women still report that they vote based on the advice of male family members.
Wow, 50%.
Yes. Furthermore, the sheer mechanics of public campaigning, attending late-night rallies, traveling district to district, often requires explicit family permission for women. This severely limits their political autonomy.
So the electorate has achieved inclusion at the voting booth, but we are completely lacking structural equality where the decisions are actually made.
Precisely.
The Women's Reservation Bill aims to fix the math, but the social bottlenecks still remain.
Correct. Legislation can mandate a quota, but overcoming the household-level barriers requires a much deeper cultural shift to translate voting parity into genuine political authority.
Speaking of structural bottlenecks, the next piece in the text and context section highlights a massive industrial vulnerability, and it actually ties right back to our West Asia discussion.
Ah, yes. India's reliance on imported energy.
Right, specifically imported energy to power its heavy manufacturing. It's the urgent quest for sovereign heat.
So when we talk about energy transitions, everyone usually pictures electric cars and rooftop solar.
Sure.
But industrial heat accounts for roughly 25% of India's total energy consumption.
A quarter of it.
Yeah. If you go to industrial towns like Morbi, which produces millions of square feet of ceramic tiles, or Ludhiana's massive textile hubs, those factories rely on burning imported natural gas to generate intense, continuous heat.
Like how hot?
Sometimes exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius.
Wow. And because of the geopolitical supply chain disruptions we talked about earlier, gas allocations to these non-priority industrial sectors have been slashed to between 65 and 80%.
And the prices spiked.
The price of that gas has tripled. This is forcing these factories to desperately look at concentrated solar thermal, or CST.
Which is very different from regular solar.
Very different. A normal rooftop solar panel is great if you want to generate electricity to run your TV or your laptop. But CST uses precise, curved mirrors to act like a giant magnifying glass. It literally concentrates raw sunlight to boil fluids to 400 degrees Celsius for a factory line.
It's amazing technology.
It is. And the data shows that because gas is so expensive right now, a CST system pays for itself in less than 3 years.
That's a very fast ROI.
So if it pays off that fast, why isn't every factory installing it tomorrow? It's like knowing a shortcut that saves you an hour of commuting, but just refusing to take it.
Well, it comes down to the brutal mechanics of the power grid. You cannot simply unplug a massive gas-fired plasma kiln and plug it into an aging local electricity grid without causing instant rolling blackouts for the entire district.
Oh, because it draws too much power.
Exactly. Furthermore, these factories run 24 hours a day, and solar heat is inherently intermittent.
Right. The sun goes down, the factory stops. You can't run an industrial oven off AA batteries.
Precisely. To make CST viable, we need a national thermal policy that aggressively incentivizes thermal storage.
Thermal storage?
Yeah, literally storing the sun's captured heat in massive super-insulated tanks so the factory can draw from it at 2 a.m. without touching the electrical grid.
That makes a lot of sense.
The piece highlights Denmark as a model for this. They instituted heat purchase agreements. A third-party company installs the solar thermal tech, and the factory simply buys the generated heat at a fixed, cheaper rate.
So the factory doesn't have to build it themselves.
Right. India has 15 gigawatts of CST potential, but the grid infrastructure and policy frameworks just aren't there yet to unlock it.
Got it. Well, that localized industrial crisis in Gujarat and Punjab is really just the tip of the spear of a much larger macroeconomic shock.
It really is.
Which brings us to the business section. The lead story lays out India's compounding energy crisis and the critical need for strategic resilience.
And the raw numbers here are really sobering. Recent tensions in West Asia drove the price of Brent crude oil from $80 a barrel to $120 almost overnight.
A 50% spike?
Yes. That external shock immediately spiked the Indian rupee to a record low of 92.34 against the US dollar, making every single import more expensive.
It's wild that a geopolitical dispute thousands of miles away instantly hits a family's kitchen table.
Instantly.
The data points out that a simple euro hike in an LPG cylinder translates directly to a 7% increase in a household's monthly cooking fuel spend.
Which is huge for a normal family.
It is. Now, the government assures us we have 25 days of crude oil in strategic reserves and 10 days for LNG, but considering how interconnected this is 25 days actually enough? Or is this a massive wake-up call?
It's absolutely a severe wake-up call. 25 days is a buffer to manage a brief logistical hiccup. It is not a solution to a prolonged blockade of the Strait of Hormuz.
Right.
The real danger is how the costs cascade through the entire economy. Higher diesel costs increase the price of transporting freight. That increases the cost of agricultural fertilizers, which ultimately drives up the price of vegetables at the market.
It just fuels systemic inflation everywhere.
Everywhere.
So how do we insulate ourselves from a game we fundamentally don't control?
The analysis points to China's strategy here. By aggressively rolling out electric vehicles, especially commercial heavy trucks, China has already displaced over 1 million barrels a day of oil demand.
Wow.
They are physically insulating their domestic economy from global oil shocks through mass electrification. The core argument here is that India must use this current price shock as the ultimate catalyst to accelerate our own clean energy transition and battery storage deployment.
True sovereignty means not being at the mercy of global oil choke points.
Exactly.
We've seen how global shocks force physical industries to optimize their systems just to survive. But in our final piece from the business section, we look at the U.S. healthcare system, where optimization has mutated into a bizarre, algorithmic arms race.
The AI medical billing story.
Yes, this is a textbook example of what happens when advanced technology meets deep bureaucracy.
It's pretty dystopian.
U.S. hospitals are spending massive amounts of money, hundreds of millions of dollars, on AI software designed specifically to maximize their billing codes.
And then on the flip side.
Right. On the flip side, the health insurance companies are deploying their own AI algorithms to ruthlessly scrutinize those exact same bills and automatically deny claims they deem unwarranted.
It literally sounds like the two robots fighting over the bill at a restaurant that you mentioned at the start.
It really does. But how does the AI actually upcharge a patient in practice?
Well, the hospital's AI scans a doctor's chart in seconds. It sees a note that says, patient felt slightly dizzy and had an elevated heart rate.
Okay, pretty standard.
Instead of billing for a standard checkup, the AI cross-references thousands of medical codes and automatically flags the visit as a complex cardiovascular evaluation.
Oh, wow.
It bumps the bill up by hundreds of dollars without the doctor actually performing any extra procedures. It's automated upcoding.
Which explains why the CEO of Centene noted sudden suspicious spikes in sepsis billing, because sepsis triggers massive payouts from insurers.
Exactly.
Blue Cross estimates over $2 billion in spending is directly tied to this aggressive AI coding. Total healthcare AI spending hit $1.4 billion recently, and 75% of that was spent by hospitals trying to squeeze more money out of the system.
And then Morgan Stanley is out here estimating $900 billion in administrative savings by 2050.
Right, but with AI artificially inflating the codes, is anyone actually saving money?
A researcher from Duke Margolis summed it up perfectly. They noted, this is a situation where no one's going to win.
Nobody wins.
Right. Both sides project massive savings to their shareholders, but the reality is they are just automating the friction. They are paying tech companies billions to build a high-tech tug-of-war, entirely avoiding the actual underlying costs of patient care.
You know, stepping back and looking across all 9 of these pieces today, that friction is everywhere.
It really is the defining theme.
We see absolute parity at the voting booth, but political machines that refuse to hand over the keys to women. Even our most advanced AI is being used not to cure diseases, but to fight over billing codes. It really leaves you with a lingering question for you to mull over. As we deploy these massive new policies and technologies, are we actually solving our core systemic problems, or are we just finding more expensive ways to change the rules of the game?
Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we're eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.